Let me quickly go over the sources for this news, because I didn't want to put it at the beginning of the video, it would slow it down, but it's important we establish this isn't just wild rumors we're reporting on, or reporting on wishful thinking lists we saw on social media. No, it's reliable reports from reliable sources. The main report that I'm going to link you to in the description box below is by the website Rhaenyra Intelligence, which has become one of the major news sources talking about Netflix's The Witcher series, though they've branched out in reporting on other big fantasy genre things, such as the Game of Thrones prequel projects, that for the past year they did a really good job of reporting on casting news and behind-the-scenes news reports for the Long Night prequel when it was filming. They have contacts in the industry, low-level people, but they would get casting sheets for the Long Night prequels, and they were one of our major sources. And some of this is public, some of it, well, they know where to look, but they know how to research that extensively. So when it's a casting report coming to us from Rhaenyra Intelligence, I'm particularly inclined to think it's real. That, well, actually what happened was, they explain this in the report, the initial rumor was on a website, they say not safe for work website, Recapped. I wouldn't be reporting on if it was what Recapped said, any more than like a tabloid like The Sun or National Enquirer. But Rhaenyra Intelligence said, we have industry contacts, and the way they phrase it is reliable leaks, as their regular leak sources and contacts in the casting industry. They reached out to independently confirm that, yeah, this report is actually real. So the combined report by Rhaenyra that we checked this against people who we know that this is a real report. So that's why I'm reporting on this, and this has some substance to it. So Rhaenyra Intelligence has an established track record of having contacts in the industry who can confirm details from casting calls, which leads to the next big point. The specific rumor they reported on actually gave one detail about the actresses they're looking for. Not physical description, we know what they look like from the books anyway. It specified their ages. The ages of the actresses they want to play these roles. And Rhaenyra Intelligence signed off on this and said, we checked with our sources, so yeah, I think this is a reliable detail. Well, for Alicent, age-wise, it just said she's slightly older than Rhaenyra, which is entirely accurate to the books, that Alicent is only about 10 to 11 years older than Rhaenyra, because she's her stepmother, that she could never have physically been her mother. They're pretty close in age. And on top of that, they mentioned that Alicent looks surprisingly young for her age, that she retained her beauty, even her figure, into her late 40s, despite having 4 pregnancies. She just was lucky that she managed to carry it pretty well. Whereas Rhaenyra, who's 10 years younger than her, looks a bit older than she is, because she had 6 pregnancies, but they were pretty difficult, and they took a lot out of her, so she looks a little, they aged her a little more than in her appearance. She's a little haggard. She's still, attractive, but she doesn't have an hourglass figure anymore. So they said Rhaenyra looks a little older, Alicent's a little younger, and even then, objectively, they're only about 10 to 11 years apart from each other. So fine, Alicent is slightly older. The real detail here is for Rhaenyra herself. It specifies they're looking for an actress to play her who is in her late 20s. Why does this jump out at me? Because in the books, when the war starts, at the outbreak of the war upon her father's death, Rhaenyra is 32. And she's described as looking a little older than her chronological age by like 2 or 3 years. So this is a strong hint that they're not going to start with the outbreak of the war, but a little before that. And this ties into Martin's blog posts about this that, were obvious to me and people who actually sat down to read through these things, that through the prequel novellas, that he said, oh, it's going to start with the lead up to the Dance with the Dragons. It's the prequel series, House of the Dragon, will build up to and then cover the Dance of the Dragons. And so many casual news sites just took that to mean, oh, they'll build up to it by showing the Targaryen conquest. Again, no, they are not covering the Targaryen conquest generation. That is an entirely separate TV series pitch idea unto itself. If you combine it with Sons of the Dragon, it would be a 5-year TV show. if you see the breakdown of it, that they're not covering all of Fire and Blood. That would be physically impossible. That, if you've read them, if you're familiar with the prequel novellas, you hear, oh, it's the build-up to the dance. Oh, the Rogue Prince novella. That these started as, well, Martin wrote them as notes, and then he released them as novellas in anthologies with other writers. So the first one was The Princess and the Queen, which starts with the king's death and the Civil War starting almost instantly, and you just dive right in. You have to quickly figure out, oh wait, who are these people? Why do they not like each other? And Martin said at the time, it's a sample from a longer history book I'm writing. Then he retroactively released Part 0, as it were, The Rogue Prince, which covers the 30-year reign of Viserys. So it starts with him ascending the throne, and then you see Rhaenyra growing up in it, from her childhood, from her mother's death, to getting this stepmother. They're friends at first. Then Alicent has children and sons who can, usurp her, so they stop being friends. And then it's Rhaenyra's loves and intrigues, her first and second marriage, her affairs, and the politics of why are certain people allies and certain people enemies, and what led to these political factions forming at the royal court, to the point they'd be willing to kill each other and have a civil war over it that tears all of Westeros apart. So it's an interesting read, The Rogue Prince, and it's relatively short. It's only like 13,000 words. But it's dealing with fighting pirates and fighting the free cities for control over the island chains in the Narrow Sea. So we see a bit more of the wider world in it, but it's a lot of its character stuff at the royal court. So there has been an argument independently, even if Martin hadn't remarked on this, of should you start this show by just having people fighting each other in the first episode? No, you should build up to explaining who the heck they are. I mean, even season 1 of Game of Thrones, most of it was exposition. The war really only starts in the season finale and really kicks up in the beginning of season 2. Most of season 1 is Ned Stark giving exposition about what Robert's Rebellion was like. Why are the Lannisters like this? Why is Robert Baratheon like this? Setup. So structurally, think of this as just the Rogue Prince would be like season 1 of Game of Thrones, but with time skips. That it would cover 10 years at least, more likely 30 years. And the example I'm thinking of is like the Tudors show with Natalie Dormer was in that a while ago, of a show where one actor plays Henry VIII, but with time skips. That he starts out, they have him playing Gertrude, playing down, so he's a little young, but by the end he's in age makeup, playing an older version of himself. That what I think they're doing here is that they wanted to play the Rogue Prince as season 1. But rather than recasting that, like, let's have a separate actress play teenage Rhaenyra, and then recast 30-year-old Rhaenyra for season 2, I think they hedged their bets and said, let's cast an actress in her late 20s who will play down and pretend to be a teenager for an episode or 2 of season 1, and then gradually shift older, and she'll age in real time, so by the time they get to her father's death in season 2, she'll be 30, which is roughly, a year or 2 younger than what Rhaenyra is supposed to be. But I can see them doing that. So I have this mental image of like Elizabeth and Mary and the Tudors start out as children, but they age every couple of episodes. So like across a season covers like 10 years of their lives. So, yeah, I think the fact they're starting with late 20s Rhaenyra confirms that we're going to see Rogue Prince in season 1, which they should have done. It would be nonsensical. I mean, you wouldn't understand who these people are if they just jumped into the war. Literally imagine just jumping into Robb Stark fighting on a battlefield in season 2. If that was the first episode, you wouldn't know what the heck was going on in season 2. You need to show the setup of the rivalry between these two factions. The rivalry between the court factions of Princess Rhaenyra and Queen Alicent. Why did the Starks side with Rhaenyra? Why did the Lannisters side with Alicent? Finally, there were 2 more pieces of interesting information in the Redanian intelligence report on this. First one is Redanian intelligence on their own. This isn't a rumor or anything. They've been playing the game we've been playing with Long Night for the past year of going through copyright databases and employee listings and filings, public filings, to try to figure out, The guy who's usually a location scout is over in the Canary Islands now. Maybe they're filming there. Or, hey, the comptroller who's usually in charge of prequels at HBO is now working with this new company. It must be a shell company for the new prequel. That sort of thing. It's fun trying to track stuff down like that and going through all following the money in the paperwork. And what Rhaenyra Intelligence found, which is, public, is the LinkedIn profile for the financial controller who worked for HBO on the Long Night prequel, Blood Moon's financial controller, William O'Toole. And in his LinkedIn profile, it says legally work on Blood Moon stopped in December 2019. That's when the clock ran out. Then it lists that he is also going to be working on the new Untitled prequel, which is actually prequel House of the Dragon, but it was filed as Untitled prequel. But what's interesting is the full name listed for the project that he was signed on officially starting January 2020. Untitled Game of Thrones prequel, quote, Red Gun. Given that guns don't exist in Westeros, it appears that Red Gun is the production codename that HBO has been using for House of the Dragon, to keep the media from tracking their behind-the-scenes contracts. Like how Star Wars Return of the Jedi was codenamed Blue Harvest, how Lord of the Rings Return of the King was codenamed Till Death for Glory. Of course, the funny thing is, within hours of Rhaenyra Intelligence making that news post, O'Toole's LinkedIn profile was updated to remove the phrase Red Gun. Now it just says Untitled Prequel, but they have screenshots of this. So it already came out, and if they're smart, HBO may update their internal documents to an entirely new codename because this got breached. But any paperwork they've been filing and copyright stuff they've filed since last January, 6 months ago or more, there's going to be a lot of copyrights and stuff filed under the name Red Gun. So we're going to have fun now trying to track those down to figure out what are they filing for, where might they be filming. So that's an interesting piece of information for news sites to track down. The second big thing, this was in the rumor report posted on Recapped, but Rhaenyra said, again, we checked with sources. It seems legitimate, though this one detail, maybe it was an assumption, I'm not sure. It talked about filming locations. Now, for time-wise, it just said they expect to be filming in 2021, which we assumed that too. If HBO said we want it to air in 2022. We expect it to be filming next summer, 2021. Fine. But their report said there's these casting sheets going around, and they expect to be filming in 2021 in, quote, the UK and Spain. Which is interesting because earlier this spring, HBO ended their contract with Titanic Studios in Belfast. They're leaving Northern Ireland. We were all shocked. They're not going to be filming in Northern Ireland anymore. It's been their home for the past decade. And I made a whole playlist of videos going over this, but if you're new to my channel, this was like a week or two before the pandemic hit in March. So everyone was a little preoccupied and not following entertainment news at the time. So if you haven't seen them, please check them out. Put a lot of effort into them, going over the inside business details of this was entirely the fault of the HBO executives, the old leadership who thankfully don't work there anymore. The Richard Plepler crowd, he's not there anymore. AT&T replaced him. But the bigger question I was examining was, okay, they're not in Northern Ireland anymore. Where is the main hub of production going to move now? I don't just mean exterior locations. You can do that anywhere. I mean the next big hub studio they can put all their internal sets in, specifically to replace Titanic Studios. And, I was trying to calm everyone down. This doesn't mean they're losing all of their locations. They film in multiple countries, like all their warm weather stuff that they've shifted to Spain, really. That a lot of stuff is filmed in Spain. King's Landing, Old Town, Bravos, Dorne, Dothraki stuff, even some Riverland stuff. Spain has a pretty varied geography. They drifted away from using Croatia too much, except for when they really needed to use Dubrovnik as a stand-in for King's Landing, but a lot shifted to Spain due to its bigger size. So we're not going to lose Spain. No surprise there. I didn't think we would. Conversely, if you've read it, The Dance of the Dragons doesn't include the Night's Watch at all, or the Wall, so you don't need cold weather locations for it. The Starks are in the war, but they come south. Like, envoys go to Winterfell, you could do that in an interior set. It doesn't need to be a location shoot. Like, think like Robb Stark on Military Campaign in the Riverlands. If the Starks are in it, they're just not at Winterfell. So, we're keeping the warm weather locations. They don't really need the colder locations of, like, this is a good quarry to put Castle Black in Northern Ireland. They will never need Castle Black for this. But the big issue is, where do we put the main hub that stands in for generic field in the middle of Westeros in the Riverlands? That was a question. But I said the main issue is, there's only a handful of studios of this huge size capable of handling a franchise on this scale. It's not like, let's start going through the phone listings to see where they might... You'll notice it's got to be one of the top dozen biggest studios in Europe. And it would still be in Europe due to needing those warm weather shoots. There's like Roman ruins they can't reproduce. So it's probably in Europe, and it's probably one of the top dozen largest studios in Europe. Narrows it down, but it's still an open question. Some have suggested that in the past 10 years, a lot of new studios have opened up in Eastern Europe. The Witcher, for example, in Hungary, or Chernobyl filmed in Lithuania. A lot of big studios with tax breaks are opening up in Eastern Europe for filming space for Western companies. And some have speculated maybe Republic of Ireland in the south, because there's this new Troy Studios in Limerick, which I consider a major candidate. They're filming Apple TV's Foundation series now. But there's a lot of space there. I thought maybe they'll go to the south. But the report says the United Kingdom, when they just left Northern Ireland. What are we to make of that? I yell about this more in the main video, please check it out, but I explain, the main reason they left was not due to Brexit. That they knew Brexit was coming, yet they still were filming the Long Night pilot last summer. They knew Brexit was coming by last summer. And they were willing to film a pilot for a show that might last, 5 to 7 years. So Brexit was a complication, but a foreseen one, and one they were apparently willing to deal with. So they didn't leave due to Brexit. It's scheduling scripts that were avoidable. Titanic Studios kept telling HBO, don't put all your eggs in one basket on the Long Night prequel. You need to have a second prequel ready to film instantly if you don't like it, which they didn't. They didn't have another one waiting. That's why we have this turnover, because they're still writing House of the Dragon, much less filming it. So Titanic was warning them in advance. If Long Night fails, there'll be a year-long turnover time where we're just sitting around with empty studios that you've technically rented but aren't paying us for because you're not filming in them. That's money we can't afford to waste. So Titanic kept telling me, just fell on deaf ears, if Long Night fails, we are selling our space to other local TV productions and we will not wait for the next prequel. And this is not Titanic's fault. This is HBO just would not listen and would not develop a fallback plan. This was entirely avoidable, and it is entirely the fault of their administration under Richard Plepler, who thankfully doesn't work there anymore. Now, the interesting twist on this is that all of this happened by last January. And then, of course, the coronavirus pandemic hit, canceling everyone's schedule. The whole reason they got kicked out was due to scheduling. Titanic said, we can't afford to wait around for a year. Now they can't sell it to anyone because everyone's shut down. So I wonder, given that the issue was not due to Brexit but due to scheduling, could House of the Dragon move back to Belfast? Possibly. Another option, which I discussed in the whole video that I did, is they might move to the new Leavesden studio that Warner Brothers built in England. Time Warner owns both Warner Brothers and HBO, and Time Warner was recently bought by AT&T, who actually want a company that runs efficiently. And they asked the obvious question, why is our movie department at Warner Brothers not helping with logistics at our TV department at HBO? Which is why when Blood Moon was filming last summer, we were surprised that there's all these Warner Brother trucks, Teamster trucks, actually moving things around. So it's not impossible that maybe they would want to move to the new WB Studios, which their parent company owns, at Leavesden. Then again, those studios are busy filming DC Comics movies, like Wonder Woman 2 and stuff. So, I'm not sure. I think there's three options here. That when they say they're filming in the UK, that might be an assumption or a mistake. One. Two, if they're filming in England, I don't know if there's that many big studios in Scotland compared to the sheer size of the Leavesden complex. It's amazing. There's a good chance they're moving to the new hub at Leavesden, which is a state-of-the-art, major franchise movie facility. Or option three, it would be hilarious if the pandemic erased the scheduling problem that made them leave Belfast in the first place, and suddenly they want to go back to Titanic Studios, because that ate up the missing year. So we'll see what happens with that. There's a lot of speculation. Also, a lot of other interesting info came out recently about the other prequel pitches, the ones that haven't been picked up, particularly about Blood Moon. And I've gotten a lot of this information. I want to give a shout out to the Twitter channel Blood Moon IRL, Blood Moon in real life, who's one of the major on-set reporters who did a lot of the spy photos for us and also tracking down all the copyright filings to figure out who's doing what. They pointed out a lot of stuff to me recently, and YouTube channel Lucifer Means Lightbringer also recently gave this report on. I talked to an extra from Blood Moon, and they said this is what the show was like, and this sort of correlated with other things we heard from David J. Peterson. So I'm going to split that off into a separate video after this. There were 2 or 3 different sources for news about the other behind-the-scenes shakeups on the other prequels, which have been canceled, but I still want to know what the hell happened with them. Oh, and one more shout-out that I want to give before I end here is to the YouTube channel Gray Area. She also realized that the House of the Dragon prequel series is probably going to be about the Dance of the Dragons, so long before this casting news broke, for weeks now, she's already been making a series of in-depth character profile videos for it, and she's already made a video on Alicent Hightower. So please head over and check out her video, it's very nice, and given that this casting news just broke and she'll be hurrying through the rest, by the time you see this video, her Rhaenyra video will probably also be finished or soon thereabouts. So head over, see the Alicent one, and soon her Rhaenyra one, and then she's going to go through the whole main cast. So things are moving forward. We don't have it in hand on an official website. It's supposed to be a secret, but it appears they are putting out casting calls for Rhaenyra and Alicent, and that Rhaenyra is in her late 20s, probably because they're starting with the Rogue Prince and then doing time jumps, and the war won't start until Season 2, which is the right way to do it. Overall, with this casting news, just hooray. We haven't had much news in general since the Season 8 Blu-ray came out back in December, which we need news to fuel the online fandom and discussion, that things were pretty slow the first half of this year up to right now, that things will be picking up in frequency now. That this is an exciting new... Officially, the casting phase has started, that potentially any day you could wake up, turn on your news on your computer, and find, wow, there's a new casting leak for Daemon or Nettles, or for Aegon II, that there's going to be news potentially every day, or just there's going to be news on a regular basis now. Please check back frequently to all the major news channels, and hopefully mine. So, if you like what you heard here, please click like and subscribe, and there's going to be a lot more House of the Dragon content coming soon. Not just covering news, I had a whole series planned that I was going to do this in conjunction with reading the chapters in Fire and Blood, going by topic of, okay, this is what the armies are like, diversity, time-wise, how would you cut up the story and schedule? I already had this planned. If you're one of my current subscribers, I was saying, I'm going to get to the House of the Dragon stuff eventually. I just had this whole huge Daenerys series I was working on. So, please stick around. A lot of new content's finally coming around again.